Hello, Mr. Adams here. We're going to be doing some review for your test coming up on Monday. As you know, my reviews for the tests, I go through the test questions and give sample problems on how to do those, not the exact ones from the test, but close, different numbers, same types of problems. So pay attention closely. I'm going to go through things quickly, but you will be able to go back. You can, rewind, you can stop, pause, go back, and go to the part of it that you don't understand or that you need some more help with. All right, so let's get started. Of course, we start out with a couple of story problems. So the first story problem has to do with sales tax. Right? Say, for instance, you have $60 that you want to spend and you want to buy your parents a gift. Good idea, right? And you find you want to buy one of your parents a gift, all right? And it's you find a watch and it's $60, or excuse, you have $60 to spend, and the watch is $58. But you got 8% sales tax, a tax on the end of that. So that tax is added on to the price, right? So you're thinking, well, do I have enough if I have $60? So what you're going to do, you got to find out how much 8% tax is. 8% of this is going to give me the amount of tax. Then I'd have to add that to the price to find out the total price. So you can do that. You can find 8%, multiply by 0.08. Remember, 2 decimal places, 0.08. You're going to do that. Or you can say, I know I'm going to pay $58, 100% of that, plus another 8%. So I'm going to spend 108% of that. Well, what is 108% as a decimal? 2 places, 1, 2, 1.08. I can multiply $58 by 1.08 and I can find out the total price. That'll give me the total. Then I'm going to take my $60 and I'm going to subtract that total and see. It might be over it. I might have enough, but I might be over. So it might be that I have this price up here, the total, and I subtract my $60 to see how much I still need. That difference from what I have to what the total price is how much I need, or maybe I have enough, right? So that's going to be a very similar question on your test coming up, all right? Another question has to do with area and perimeter, right? Not perimeter, but just area in this case, all right? So we're going to, I already did this, I'm going to erase some of it. Right. Say, for instance, all right, you have a room that measures 22 by 30. So what is that shape? If you have a room with that shape, 22 by 30, it's a rectangle, isn't it? All right. So how much would it cost to put down new flooring at $6 a square foot? First we have to find out the area, because that's what square foot is. Got to figure the area. The area of a rectangle, A equals length times width, right? By the way, you need to know all the formulas. They are on, you have to match them, but they're there. You got to know the formulas for area and perimeter, right? Length times width. We know that the length is 22 by 30. So you're going to take 22 times 30, and that's going to give you, and I can tell that's going to be 660. All right? That's 660 square feet, right? 660 square feet. It's $6 a square foot. If I take $6 times 660 square feet, every square foot is $6. So 660 of them is going to be 660 times 6. If I multiply that out times $6 square foot, it'll tell me how many dollars it's going to cost me to do that floor. All right? Question very similar to that on your test on Monday. All right. Next, all right, I'm going to erase real quick here. And we're going to, of course, you always have review from all the way back to the beginning of the year almost. So there's a lot of different stuff. But you're going to have addition and subtraction of decimals. That's just a matter of being careful, doing the subtraction and the addition carefully, making sure you bring your decimal point down. Not a problem. Shouldn't be a problem. You got decimal multiplication. Say I have 0.006 times 0.03. Well, I multiply this out, I'm going to have 18, carry the 1, 0 plus 1, 0, all right? I don't need to multiply this 0 out, not necessary. But I do have to make sure that I count my decimal. I got 5 decimal places here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to add a couple of zeros on there. 0.00018. Make sure you count up your decimal places. Don't just move it to the front and think that's good. You got to count them. You got to do it. Got to get that glare off of there. Sorry about that. All right. So next, let's take a look. You're going to have multiplication of decimals. If I have, again, it's just a matter of counting the number of decimal places in the problem and moving those number of decimal places. They're not tough multiplication problems. You just got to be careful. You just got to think and check your work. Some of you are not checking, and it's going to cost you dearly. Right? You could get an A, but you're going to wind up with a C because you don't check your work. All right. So fractions. Remember, if I have something like 7/8 and 3/4 and 1/2, I can't add those. We've been going over this for all year long, basically. You're going to have to change those denominators to a common denominator, aren't you? Right? What do all 4 of those numbers go into equally? Well, you can say, oh, 16ths. And you could do that. You could change them to 16ths. But you'd be doing more work than you need to. Because instead, you can just change them to 8ths. This one's already 8ths. This changes to 8ths. This changes to 8ths. Don't go any more than that. Just go ahead, multiply this by 2 over 2. Multiply that by 4 over 4. And you end up with 6/8 and 4/8. And this stays 7/8. You add them up, 13 and 4 is 17/8, which is an improper fraction. You got to divide. All right, you got to divide that out and make your remainder a fraction. 17 divided by 8, twice, 16, 1, 2 and 1/8. You know, those kind of things. That's what you got to do. If you got whole numbers over here, 3, 5, 7, you got to add the 2 and 1/8 to those whole numbers when you add those up. Right? That's how it's done. Right? Again, quick review. Most of you are getting the fractions down now. Okay, we've been doing them and doing them and doing them, and you're getting them down. Right? Let's see. You've got percent. Say I have 16 and 3/4% of 1,500. I'm going to take this 16 and 3/4%, change the percent to a decimal and multiply. Change it to a decimal by starting here at the end of the whole number, not at the end of the fraction, end of the whole number, 12.16. Now, what's 3/4 as a decimal? You know that. You should have it memorized by now. 0.16. Then you just add that decimal equivalent on the end. All right, the number, 75. 0.1675 times, that's what of means, 1,500. Do the multiplication, get your answer, make sure you move 4 decimal places. That's what's there. All right. Let's see. Subtraction of fraction problem. Again, make sure you got like denominators. In this particular one, there's no borrowing. You don't have to borrow. Simple problem. All right. You do have a division problem. You're dividing by a decimal. Say, for instance, you have 3.85 and you're dividing by 4.3. You got to move that decimal place if you're dividing by a decimal. If you move it 1 here, you got to move it 1 here, and then you bring it straight up. Now you start your division, right? And do the problem. All right. It's a multiplication of fractions problem. If you're multiplying a fraction times a whole number, say a mixed number, say 4 1/2 times 5. All right? You can do that, 5 over 1. You can always make a fraction out of a whole number. This, you can't just multiply times that number. What you have to do is change this to an improper fraction, which is 9 over 2. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9 over 2, times 5 over 1. Do your multiplication. If you have an improper fraction, divide it out. If you can cancel, go ahead. This one you can't do that. But if you can cancel, go ahead and do your canceling. It'll save you some time. All right. Remember division of fractions? Say I have 13 divided by 1/4. That's 13 over 1 divided by 1/4. Then you invert and multiply. You only invert this number, and you always invert that number. 13 over 1 times 4 over 1. All right? And you end up with 52, right? 52 over 1, which equals 52, right? Yep, 12, yep, 52, all right? So that's how you do those. Quick review. The next thing we're going to do is something you haven't covered a lot of yet, but there's going to be a problem like this, where they're going to give you a circle. It's divided out into sections, in this case, blue, yellow, red, and we have, say we're talking about marbles here, all right? And we have 10 blue, 7 red, and 10 yellow. And we want to know what the percentage is of each one of those. Well, first you have to know the total number of marbles. And if you add these up, you know you come out with 20, correct? All right, 17, 3 is 20. So each one of these, 10 is what part of 20? You make a fraction out of each one. 10 out of 20, 7 out of 20, and 3 out of 20. And you change those to percents. Now the ones that you're going to see on the test, if you make those fractions, you're going to see that, oh, I recognize those fractions. All right? In these, you know that 20ths, all I got to do, percent means hundreds. So if I change these to hundredths, it's going to give me my percent, isn't it? All right? So 10 over 20, what do I have to multiply 20 by to give me 100? 5. If I multiply this by 5, I get 50. And you also know that that is 1/2, isn't it? Which is 50%. Right? 7 out of 20. I'm going to multiply this times both of them by 5. It gives me 35 over 100, which is 35%. Over here, I'm going to multiply them by 5. I'm going to get 15%. Okay. That's what we're talking about. You're going to have a problem just like that on the test. Right. So that covers the first page. We're going to quickly take a look here. You have to match your formulas, area and perimeter, all right? Let's look at the rectangle. A rectangle, the formula, perimeter equals 2L plus 2W, all right? You have to know the formulas. You know that if you don't, you can just add up the sides and get the perimeter. But this is the official formula, and you got to know it, at least knowing it for the tests and the quizzes that you got to do. It also, it's logical, it makes sense. 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So you multiply it out, right? If you got 8 there and you've got 10 here, 8 times 10. Oops, sorry, that's area. Perimeter, 2 times L plus 2 times W, 2 times the length will be 2 times 10 plus 2 times 8 for the width, 20 plus 16, 36. Some of you are just taking, adding these two numbers together and thinking that's going to be the perimeter. No, you're only doing half the perimeter that way. All right, it's 2L plus 2W. All right, let's take a look at area. All right. area equals length times width. That's the basic area formula for any, you're looking at a square, a rectangle, or a parallelogram. It's length times width or base times height for the parallelogram. Parallelogram, area is base times height. All right? Length times width. Why? Because you got to have this number. They got to give you that number for the area of a parallelogram, and that is the height. That's the height. Right? You got to have it. So, area here of the parallelogram, base times height. The perimeter of that parallelogram, all right, perimeter of the parallelogram is still 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. But remember, that height is not the width. The height is not the width on the parallelogram. All right? So, there's your formulas there for rectangle, parallelogram. How about square? Okay, how about a square? All right? And it's still, the square, it's still length times width, but they just say it differently because the sides, all 4 sides are the same. Because if we have a square, we're going to have, if it's 4 inches here, it's going to be 4 there, it's going to be 4 there, and it's going to be 4 here. Every side is 4. So, perimeter equals 4 times the side. You take one of the sides, you multiply it by 4. Gives you the perimeter, gives you the distance around it. It's 4, 4, 4, 4, or 16, isn't it? All right? So, and here the area just so happens that it's going to be the same. But the area, okay, let's make this, as a matter of fact, let's make them 5s. Shouldn't have used 4. Let's make them 5s. All right? So, this would be, okay, 4 times the side, or 4 times 5 is 20. All right? This here is area equals side squared, or side times side. You're still multiplying length times width. That's what you're doing. It's length times width, but they're saying, since they're the same, it's side times side, or side squared, and that's going to be 25, isn't it? All right? And again, squaring something, 5 squared is 25. There's questions on there. They're going to give you to the 3rd power or 4th power. It means this number times itself that many times. 5 to the 3rd would be 5 times 5 times 5. Okay? That's another review question on the test. All right? So, area, perimeter of squares, rectangles, parallelograms. Then we have the triangle. Doesn't matter what shaped triangle it is. Okay? How it's looking there. The formula, 1/2 base times height. Why? Because it's half. A triangle is half a rectangle, or half a parallelogram. So, instead of just base times height, it's 1/2 base times height. Pretty simple, right? That's the formula for area of a triangle, right? For the perimeter of a triangle, you got to add the 3 sides. Side plus side plus side. Just add the 3 sides together. Distance around it, right? 1/2 base times height. If the height was 6 and the base was 8, it's 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 8, 48. Half of that is 24. Or you could take half of 6 and get 3, multiply it by 8, get 24. Or you could take half of 8 and get 4, multiply it by 6, get 24. Same thing. Area. And area is always square measures. Square measures, because you're figuring how much space is in here. Perimeter, distance around it. All right. All right. So that's area, perimeter, those formulas for you. They're going to give you on the test, they're going to say things like, find the perimeters, and they're going to give you 3 problems. And it's going to say, you got a rectangle, and it's a rectangle that is the length equals 18 and the width equals 7. All right, and they want you to find the perimeter. Well, you go 2L plus 2W. L is 18. 2 times 18 plus width is 7. 2 times 7. 36 plus 14, and you end up with 50, right? Okay? That's the kind of problem they're going to give you. Then they'll give you something like this. They'll say the same thing, or they'll say a square. You have a square,